welcome. Oh, good. Welcome, honorable members of parliament, excellencies, heads of missions and delegations, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Winnie Gyanyima. I'm the director of the gender team at the United Nations Development Program. Thank you for the wonderful turnout for this evening's gathering, when we will launch a very important new guidebook called Empowering Women for Stronger Political Parties. My role here is simply to introduce our esteemed speakers. And there is no one more suited to launch this guidebook than the Right Honorable Helen Clark. She is a true pioneer who has broken glass ceilings on both the national and global stages. Currently the administrator of UNDP since 2009, Helen Clark is the first woman to lead our organization. She was New Zealand's second female prime minister, but the first to lead her party to electoral victory. She served 3 consecutive terms, and her government pursued policies to reduce inequalities, especially for the native Maori people, to promote sustainable development and the social and economic welfare of all the people. Honorable Clark described her personal leadership style, and I found this on Google. I hope she doesn't throw me out of my job. She said that her leadership style is, quote, direct, open, blunt, a lot of contact with the media. Helen Clark is no stranger to the workings of political parties. In 1993, when she was elected head of the Labour Party, she became the first woman in New Zealand to head a major political party. Speaking in an interview about her early involvement in politics, she said, "It's been a very deliberate decision. You don't just drift in." How true. Clearly, the Right Honorable Clark brings a wealth of experience and understanding to any discussion of women's participation in political parties. Following Helen Clark's speech, I will have the privilege of passing the microphone to Mr. Ken Wallach. Mr. Wallach is president of the National Democratic Institute, which was our partner in developing the guidebook to be launched this evening. The Washington-based National Democratic Institute works to support and strengthen democratic institutions worldwide through citizen participation, openness, and accountability in government. Mr. Wallach has been president of the NDI since 1993. I must say that Ken, we call him Ken, really needs no introduction within the UN family. He's currently a member of the Advisory Committee on Voluntary Foreign Aid and has served as chairman of the US Committee for the United Nations Development Program. In that capacity, he's been a great champion of UNDP's work and has done an amazing job of gaining visibility for UNDP in Washington among the powers that be. Finally, we will conclude with remarks from the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, who is the Speaker of Parliament of Uganda. The first woman to be elected to this position in Uganda, Rebecca Kadaga is an accomplished lawyer with a long track record of championing women's rights. She has been elected to the Uganda Parliament 5 times, served 23 years, and has served in 3 ministerial positions. One of the most influential members of the governing party, the National Resistance Movement, Rebecca sits on its most senior decision-making committees. We are delighted that Rebecca will share with us some insights from her long experience on how to promote gender equality within political parties. So now, please join me in welcoming to the podium the Right Honourable Helen Clark.
Many thanks, Winnie, for the introduction. And I also acknowledge the Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, our partner Ken Wallach, National Democratic Institute, and the many people here, particularly those who've travelled from far away to attend the Committee on the Status of Women this week. And we're here, of course, to launch Empowering Women for Stronger Political Parties. And it is a good practices guide to promote women's political participation. As Winnie says, it is a subject about which I know more than a little, having been a member of a political party for rather over 40 years. I did start young, in case you're wondering. And I am well aware that political parties can be the greatest supporters of women's participation in politics or its worst enemies. And so the idea of the guide is to make sure more of them are the greatest supporters and fewer are the worst opponents. But as someone who rose up the greasy pole of politics in my own country, I do know full well the challenges that women face when seeking to enter what have been male-dominated occupations. And politics has been a male-dominated occupation in most countries forever and a day. But we need women in party structures, we need women in government, we need women at the top of parliaments, like our speaker from Uganda. We need women coming forward and able to take their place in the decision-making of their country. And I might also observe that research is clearly showing that women politicians and leaders, and I won't say universally, but on average, tend to place greater emphasis on social issues, seeing them through the eyes of women, whether that be tackling poverty, to how basic services are provided, and what priority is given to what kind of critical infrastructure. And it's very important, of course, critical to have those perspectives in policy making. Now, a work like this comes out of collaboration, as does all the great deal of work which UNDP does, guided by the practice on gender, which Winnie leads around the world. We work with partners like National Democratic Institute, with the Interparliamentary Union, with sister UN agencies, now including UN Women, to promote women's political participation. And that work variously could include support for electoral law and processes. And sometimes you get a good result, sometimes you don't. Sometimes we've been able to support countries putting in place very good legislation to lift women's participation. Other times, like in Papua New Guinea, where huge efforts have been made with Dame Carol Kidu to take it forward, the politics in the end isn't so productive, but we hope it'll come back another time. So we've given support for good laws, good processes, we've given support for training for women candidates, and also support for women who've been elected to be effective in their elected roles. What we can see is numbers of women members of Parliament have been growing slowly but steadily to almost 20% of the global total, somewhere 17, 18, 19%. Not enough, but better than it was. I could tell my story about when I first was elected to the New Zealand Parliament in 1981, and the numbers in the New Zealand Parliament of women that year doubled from 4 to 8. And would you believe that the newspaper started writing, "What is happening to New Zealand politics? The women are taking over." 8 out of 92. And we had a very authoritarian Prime Minister at the time who didn't think much of any of us. And I remember when he made his valedictory speech from Parliament some years later, no doubt driven out by the women, he said that one of the big changes over his many years in politics had been the increase in the numbers of women in Parliament, and that frankly they had absolutely terrified him. So, yay. Anyway, the numbers are growing around the world, but at the level of women heads of government, it remains very low, about 6% of the total. In my first year as Prime Minister in New Zealand, I came up to the Millennium Summit of the General Assembly, and Mary Robertson convened a meeting of women heads of government and heads of agency. We could have fitted into a telephone box. There was me, there was the President of Latvia, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. I'm not sure any of the other small number of women heads of government made it. And then there was Mary and Rohala Broadland and maybe one or two others from the agencies. It was a very, very small gathering. I have to say that at the UN level it would be a much bigger gathering today, but at the head of the government level it's still pretty slow. But the link I want to make between that and this book is that for the most part, people who get to be heads of government have come up through political parties. And if you can't get up through political parties, how are you ever going to get to be head of government? So it's so critical for the parties to be putting in place the processes and structures which can bring the women through. So this report really highlights the importance of political parties as vehicles for the nurturing and promotion of women's political participation and leadership. Now, it's estimated that probably 40 to 50% of political party members are women, but the women hold only about 10% of the leadership positions within parties. And I could tell you about that too, because I became a leader in my party and led it for 15 years. But in the struggle to get there, I remember men saying, oh, she'll never make a good leader because she doesn't drink at night with the boys. That is true. I never drank at night with the boys. But you have to carve out a style that gets respect for doing things in a different way. Women, of course, are very highly represented at the grassroots levels of parties, often in support roles, not able to take the leadership roles, but definitely underrepresented at the higher levels. So what can a book like this do? Well, it can highlight the good practices which have seen women able to move up the party structures. When the evidence is analysed, it shows us that the challenges which are facing women's advancement in political parties are actually rather common regardless of what region of the world we're talking about, regardless of the country's size, regardless of its development status. The challenges are actually not dissimilar whether one is in a new democracy or an established one, and the challenges are not dissimilar across the political parties spectrum as such. So, what are the ways in which the parties can help? Well, this looks at the different points in the electoral cycle, starting with prior to elections. Parties select candidates so they can do things to ensure that women are in electoral positions, either on party lists or in winnable or safe constituencies. And there are examples like the party in Canada which set up a recruitment committee whose job was to ensure diversity in candidate selection. Gives another example of a party in Costa Rica which alternates men and women on its electoral lists. I recall also that that was a practice with at least one party in Norway as well. Then, during elections themselves, strategies which have proven to be effective in supporting women's participation include training and mentoring of women candidates, ensuring women's visibility in the campaigns, and making sure that electoral monitoring, the security provided around candidates, which is very important in quite a number of countries, and voter information are all gender sensitive, so that the women get a fair go. Then, the Guidebook looks at strategies for supporting women after they have been elected. In El Salvador, there is an association of women parliamentarians and ex-parliamentarians, and it offers training in communications and organising skills to help the women become more effective in their political work, both inside and outside the parliament. In South Africa, the Women Party members actually pushed for changes to the parliamentary calendar so that the needs of parliamentarians with families could be accommodated. And I can say that was also something women in my own parliamentary system in New Zealand pushed for as well. So I think the value of this guidebook is it does share practical experiences of what a wide range of parties have done and are doing to boost female participation. It looks at what motivated them to take these steps, and it describes the political benefits parties themselves may gain from undertaking them. And let's be clear here, if you are a political party in a proportional representation system, and you are going out to the electorate with very few women in winnable positions on your list, there's actually a pretty powerful reason for women not to vote for that party. So turn it around. If you're going to give women a fair shake, then you can go out and compete for support on the basis that women's representation is important and gender issues are important to that party. So it's not only the right thing to do for parties to promote women, but it will have electoral benefits. This book then is an important advocacy tool, but it's also a capacity building tool. It's the sort of book that can be taken out to political parties, worked on with the global political party associations to get discussion on how to lift the recruitment, the promotion and the support of women in political parties and processes. And the hope is that after concerted efforts guided by best practice, such as that suggested in the guide, we will really see the level of women's participation lift. There was a 30% target set for women members of national legislatures in the MDGs. We're obviously falling short of that by at least 10 percentage points at the moment. Can we make a difference with a concerted push with the kinds of examples and experiences shared in this book? I think we can. So I'm very grateful to all the team in UNDP and the National Democratic Institute that worked to bring this together. That, of course, in this launch are only the first step. The next step is to get it out there and to really advocate for this within political party structures around the world. So it's a great pleasure to be here, to be part of launching it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Helen Clark, for those remarks. It's now my privilege and honour to hand the microphone to Mr. Ken Wall. Ken, join me to welcome Mr. Ken Wall.
First of all, I wanted to thank the UNDP for hosting this wonderful and beautiful reception. Coming from Washington, D.C., where no building can be taller than the U.S. Capitol, every time I come to New York, I feel like a country bumpkin. You can rarely look down on anything in Washington, so this is just a spectacular setting for this launch of this document. First, I would like to thank everybody who was involved with this document and conceived this document over the past several years and brought it to a realization. It was originally conceived by Winnie and Randy Davis and Kristen Peppard, the then women's director at NDI, who's been ably succeeded by Susan Markham, who's here, and their invaluable inputs made this publication a reality. And thanks are also due to the many interviewees who contributed their time and knowledge to the development of all the case studies, and to all the local and regional NDI staff members who helped facilitate the field research and the case studies. And they deserve a great deal of credit. And also, we owe a debt of gratitude to Julie Ballington from the UNDP, who guided the publication to its completion. And thanks to all of those from the UNDP in attendance who provided feedback and comments, including Suki Beavers and Randy Davis. This was truly a team effort. First of all, I wanted to say how proud NDI is of our relationship with the UNDP, which has benefited measurably from the leadership, experience, and expertise of the Prime Minister. I don't know if you get to keep your title in New Zealand.
Only in America.
But in your case, you deserve it. You should. I think the Women's Guide is the most recent product of this ongoing partnership. I'd like to step back just a little bit and give you a few sort of snapshots from 30 years of our experience in democratic development around the world. Because I think it leads into sort of the efforts that contributed to this document. The first lesson, I think, and we saw it so vividly in the events last year in the Middle East, and that is that people are in a demanding mood. They want to put food on their table, but they also want to have a political voice in the issues that affect their daily lives. And that democracy and economic development are actually mutually inclusive, not mutually exclusive. And this is true in people across borders and across regions. There is no such thing as a clash of civilizations. The second, I think, important lesson is that in many countries, even after major political obstacles to democratic growth have crumbled, stepped aside, or even been swept out of office by popular vote, it remains difficult for large segments of the population to combat the legacies of political exclusion. Even when reform-minded governments are elected, they often gain control of a governing structure with few channels of popular access. Almost invariably, it is the poorer segments of society, along with women and youth, who suffer this dearth of access to democratic political processes. In many cases, the situation is exacerbated when years of political exclusion harden into resignation, apathy, or fatalism. And overcoming this legacy requires not only training on the skills for collective action and advocacy, but also assisting political institutions to work better to improve the quality of life for all citizens and not just for a few. And special efforts are required to engage marginalized segments of the population, especially women, and particularly in political life. Traditionally, more committed to peace building and post-conflict reconstruction, women bring perspectives to negotiating tables and governing institutions. Women lawmakers are often perceived as more honest and more responsive than their male counterparts, qualities that encourage confidence in democratic and representative institutions. In a study of 33 democratic countries, the presence of more women in legislatures is positively correlated with enhanced perceptions of government legitimacy among both men and women. And more women in legislatures ensure that the quality of life issues that people care most about are addressed. And the honorable speaker, who we will hear from in a few minutes, is evidence of this, and particularly the work in Uganda of the Women's Parliamentary Association. Another important lesson, as Prime Minister Clark said, is that political parties are the primary vehicle and most direct through which women can access elected office and political leadership. And therefore, the structures, policies, practice, and values of parties have a profound impact on the level of women's participation in political life of their country. Parties that take women's political participation seriously benefit from stronger electoral positions, access to new groups of voters, and stronger relationships with their constituents. Additionally, parties that can produce new faces and ideas maintain a vibrant and energized image in an age of declining voter turnout. Some results are dramatic, some are more nuanced, and some are achieved progressively. But the overall outcome for political parties is a net gain in every case. Political parties gain when women not only participate in the electoral and governing processes, but also influence them. Superficial efforts to increase the number of women involved in politics that offer no real qualitative influence or decision-making powers are unlikely to produce any new or immediate benefits. Typical examples of such efforts, as the Prime Minister said, include women's wings without statutory authority or sway, the selection of so-called female placeholders on candidate lists, the marginalization of female officials once they are elected, placing women in unelectable districts as candidates, or removing women from viable positions on candidate lists at the last minute. And we have seen evidence of all of these practices worldwide. Now, the universal trend is towards democratic governance based on parity and equality among genders. Outreach to traditionally underrepresented groups such as women is now considered a minimum standard for the democratic functioning of political parties and for the legislative bodies within which they operate. Quotas, which is addressed extensively in this guide, whether mandatory, legislative, or voluntary, continue to be the most effective means for increasing the number of women in both political parties and elective office. But quotas in and of themselves have not overcome the many obstacles that women confront, including developing the political will to actually meaningfully implement those quotas. This publication is organized in a way that political parties and those working with parties to increase women's political involvement can find strategies to use throughout the electoral cycle and across roles that political parties fail. And we know too often when the parties fail and when the legislators fail, the entire democratic system is placed in jeopardy. Women's political participation may be promoted not only as candidates, but also as party members, leaders, and office holders. And we hope that this guide and that our partnership in this effort can contribute meaningfully in the months and years ahead to ensure that women play that leadership role beyond simply participating. And so we are very, very proud to join the UNDP and to ensure that this publication doesn't sit on shelves, but becomes something that is utilized on the ground around the world and to have an impact on issues we care so deeply about. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you for those comments and for the partnership with UNDP. I was saving the best for last. We're going to hear now, and it's my honor, it's my privilege to invite, but maybe before I do, let me acknowledge the labor of one of our colleagues, the strong, intellectual, brilliant, loving labor of Julie Ballington, who is the lead author of this publication. Julie, thank you. So it's my honor and privilege to invite the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, Speaker of the Ugandan Parliament, to share with us from her experience how to promote women's leadership in political parties and the benefits it brings. Welcome. Please join me.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and Madam Prime Minister, and Ken, and all our friends gathered here. I'm delighted to be present at the launch today of this vital tool. I say it's vital because despite the Mexico First Women's Meeting, despite the Nairobi forward-looking strategies, despite the Beijing Platform of Action, the doors are not opening as fast as we expected. So anything that comes to facilitate the activities and movement of women in the political space is very, very welcome. And I want to thank the UNDP for it. I want to just talk about our experiences. Africa has got some of the best and also some of the worst. Rwanda at 56%, Nigeria, the giant, at 4%, and many others in between. That's at the level of parliament. But even on the African continent, we're still searching for the 30% at the cabinet. I don't think we have achieved that. In Uganda, we moved from 17% in the last administration to 22% in the cabinet, so still not there. Although we have achieved the 30% at the parliamentary level and 40% at the local government, we still think that there's so much we have to do, hence these tools. The parties, as we were told this morning, are the gatekeepers of the past, of the space. They take the decisions about where you'll be. They control the space through the parliamentary primary elections. They decide who will get the money and who will get supported, and who will withhold, because the parties also fight their own candidates. So it's no easy going. So any tool that can help us to raise money, to mobilize, to coordinate, is something that we should carry as an essential tool of all our activities. I just want to share a brief experience of my rise into this position. Willie told you I've been in the House for 23 years. I've grown with the Parliament. I came in young. And because of my experience in terms of years, I thought I was good enough to be a speaker 10 years ago. What did they tell me? You're too young. The senior members of the party won't take kindly to a young woman chairing the House. Age at that time, not experience. Then when I said fine, I'll wait, our time is on my side. When I tried again, different reason, new parameters. Yes, you're competent, but you're disrupting the political landscape, and Catholics are going to get angry, as you're a Protestant, and this and that. So we shall not support you, not because I was not competent, but now they moved from age to religion. And that's my party. Now, so what I did this last time, I took the initiative. I went to the head of my party 2 months after the elections and said, I've been very obedient, I've been very compliant, I've been a faithful member of the party, but now this is what I want, and I want your support. And so, and many of the men thought that I would be ordered like was the last 3 times. But this time I wasn't waiting for that. So I moved fast. I contacted every elected member of the House. By the time they were sworn in, they knew my voice, they knew my number, and I pulled the carpet from everybody. So by the time the men woke up, I was miles ahead. But if I had not done that, they were happy to keep me as a deputy. Not because I was not competent, but they thought the man should be at the top. So there are no easy options. You have to be focused. You have to be aggressive. Yes, yes. You do have to be aggressive. Then eventually you can get what you want. So that's why I welcome the publication of the UNDP. It's been a long time coming, but I think its launch will enable more women now with hindsight to know what to do, how to plan. Because for many of us, we fell in through the deep end. There were no parameters, no experiences, We just jumped in, right into the deep end. So I commend the book to you, and I look forward to better statistics, not only of the African continent, but throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Rebecca Kadaga. Now, on behalf of the National Democratic Institute and UNDP, I welcome you all to continue having a drink and sharing your experiences and sharing what you know about promoting women's leadership in political parties. Thank you all for coming.